What's going on, Saints fans? Inside Black and Gold is back. Our NFL Combine edition from New Orleans. Jeff and I we're stationary. We haven't at the actual NFL Combine in Indianapolis, but definitely monitoring all the action coming from it. Mickey Loomis, Kellen Moore, even Jeff Ireland spoke the other day. Not too much revealed, little nuggets of what the Saints plans for. And we're going to talk about, obviously, the kind of news about Derek Carr that seems like this team is committed to the QB, but nothing definitely set in stone, and a bunch of other stuff as we gear up for the NFL draft. That's right around the corner soon enough. I know that'll ramp up a ton right after Mardi Gras.
Yeah, the Combine is always I always feel so out of the loop during the Combine. It's like the one event we don't really cover this in like the league meetings. It just doesn't justifying the expense to like fly out there to have like a 10-minute interview and then pretend to scout players that are not going to come here. Just it's hard to justify the expenses. Let's put it that way. So yeah, it becomes like, well, I guess we're going to have to like learn this information just like everybody else, which is frustrating. But, I think it's telling that, that Mickey Loomis, Jeff Ireland, Kellen Moore all talked extensively. And really the only news that came out of it was Derek Carr, the comments on Derek Carr. And really not even, hey, he's our starting quarterback. More so
exactly
the tone around him as potentially being the starting quarterback is a lot different than the tone that we heard and was set during Kellen Moore's introductory press conference. That's the difference.
I thought a lot of folks were just jumping the gun there saying he is QB1 for week one. I was like, is it really, what was said? There were definitely still complimentary of the quarterback. And it appears, they are committed to him going forward, but it still wasn't definite.
Yeah, based on my understanding and what I've been able to kind of glean from New Orleans, it sounds like Mickey Loomis was a lot more definitive on that front than Kellen was, but Kellen was literally sitting next to Mickey. So like, I think they have a kind of a united front there. And I think what we're learning about Kellen and what we have learned about Kellen, and he's gonna be that play it right down the middle at all times guy. Like you're not going to get a lot out of him and maybe he opens up as the season goes on, as he gets a little more comfortable in that role, but he's going to be a short answers guy. He's not going to divulge a lot. He's going to play both sides on most situations, and you're just going to have to kind of figure it out as you go. All that said, based on what Mickey was saying, which is like, hey, we're excited about it. We feel like we have a guy we can win with, this, and the other thing. It sounds like those meetings between Kellen and Derek Carr and the staff, you now have a coaching staff in place who you can bounce ideas off of and figure out, like, hey, what do you think about this, and the other thing? I think that's telling that, you're kind of gearing toward that. And like we've talked about this, like it was always the most sensible play to keep Derek Carr around and restructure that contract. Like the only reason you would be if Kellen Moore said, no, I don't want to. And that's why I've been saying the same thing since before we even thought Kellen Moore was going to be the guy. It was any coach who landed in New Orleans as their head coach. That was going to be the question. Is Derek Carr your guy, or do we have to go find somebody else? And the answer could have been either way. And that will determine, hey, do we keep him around? Do we restructure that deal? Because it's just functionally this season, being able to restructure that deal, or, Derek has said he won't take a pay cut. I still think they're going to have conversations about reworking this deal in some capacity, whether they can find a win-win scenario that's not just, hey, took a pay cut, but even if it's still functionally that, I think you are going to go down that road. So you might not restructure it fully in that way. It makes everything so much easier. But we'll talk about more of that. We're also going to get into the NFLPA grades that came out this week. Saints did pretty well in that. They've jumped up from 19th to 12th, and their two biggest issues seem to be remedied. So we'll talk about that a little bit. In the second segment, we're going to chat with Lorenzo Neal, former NFL fullback, was actually drafted to the Saints way back when. He knows Brandon Staley, but was on the Chargers for a while. He hosts a podcast talking about the Chargers, so he knows a lot about Brandon Staley. Also a Fresno State alum. So we got some insight on Derek Carr, the pride of Fresno State. Then in the final segment, we'll talk more about the coaching hires that have happened. As I just mentioned, Brandon Staley. We haven't really gotten into that yet, so we can talk about that. Also want to get into the combine, some mock draft stuff. But, so like, I know you say you don't feel like it's definitive, and I agree. I think things can change between now and the start of the regular season. I think relationships can fall apart. They can improve. Trades could be put on the table. I still don't think that's really an option for Derek Carr. But, what is your kind of reaction, which I know can be very visceral for some people when it comes to Derek Carr? What is your reaction to the prospect of a very likely third season of Derek Carr as the starting quarterback for the Saints?
I'm definitely on the side of, I don't necessarily think it's still,
cast that out. That's not what I'm asking. I am asking when that thought washes across your brain and lights up certain areas inside your skull, what is your reaction if Derek Carr is here for a third season?
Yeah.
That's what I want to
know. Sadly, it's a sign of the same old for this team that's committed to sticking with the belief that they're still in it for the NFC South and think they can compete for the top spot. And I guess when you look at the teams in the division, there is that belief, and it should be a belief, that you can compete for that when you look at the Tampa Bays, Atlantas, and Carolina teams in this division, because whether you like it or not, Derek Carr does give you the best chance to win of the QBs on the roster currently. And I don't think the free agent class is anything that spectacular. I just have a problem with, Jeff, the fact that we've talked about it a ton, that, the signs of Derek Carr selling his house in New Orleans. He hasn't been around for Super Bowl. I doubt he'll be around for Mardi Gras. And we've heard zip still about the hiring of the new coach in Kellen Moore. Nothing even, hey, looking forward to working with the new guy in New Orleans. I don't want to say it's telling, but it's just, little weird signs out there. And I'm probably reading too much into things, but that's just the way I feel about it right now.
No, I mean, I agree with you in the sense that Derek has not done a ton to make himself the face of this team or ingratiate himself in the city or become more than kind of the mercenary quarterback of the Saints who showed up and is getting paid a lot of money to play quarterback. He's the best option at quarterback. Like, if you look at any objective metric, he's the best option at quarterback. Like that. Yep. And if we can eliminate this kind of agenda-driven idea of like, he's just terrible and blah, blah. Like, what are you looking at that tells you that it should be Spencer Rattler other than I want to lose the most games possible? Like, point me to the evidence that the Saints would be even remotely better or even close to scratch with Spencer Rattler as a quarterback, because it doesn't exist. The only reason most people look at Spencer Rattler as a viable option is because he has this intrinsic quality of not being Derek Carr.
Right.
I'm dead serious. Like, I like Spencer as a prospect. I think he has a chance to develop into a high-level backup quarterback, maybe a starter down the line. If you watched him last season and came away saying he's got to be our week one starter in 2025, then I will point to you and say, you're just a hater, because there is no way that you can analyze the quarterback position and be like, he's got it, that guy does it.
Right. Pass me the cup that you're sipping on, because I don't know what you were watching.
Yeah, it's it's confirmation bias. It's, hey, I'm going to like this guy more than that guy, regardless of what happens. And I like Spencer. I'm not trying to trash Spencer, but this idea that people have that he's ready to start is crazy to me. When you watched a guy go 0-6, you watched a guy. So, I mean, think of Kellen Moore going into a film study room and watch. Oh, so this guy started 6 games and he finished the 7th. Okay, so that's what 20, what's 6 times 4, 24, and then he played the second half against the Commanders. So out of 26 total quarters, what'd you get? So 2. He played 1 good quarter against the Bucks. He played 2 good quarters against the Commanders, a game he didn't start. He played another 2 good quarters in the first half against the Bucs in that second matchup. So that's 5 total quarters of reasonably decent football. And then the math is pretty simple. It's 21 quarters of unwatchable football. And nothing was there to help him. To be fair, he was not ready to start. You had to throw him in there. He did better than Jake Haener in whatever time we saw Jake Haener, so I'll give him credit for that. But it was bad. It was bad football, right? So if I'm Kellen Moore and I'm coming in and saying, "Hey, I want to win some games," my goal is to not go 2-15. And I think when you're watching these things, it's the same reason Darren Rizzi was like, "Yeah, if Derek Carr can play, he's going to play because I want to win games. My goal is to win games." And I think that's why people have such a hard time understanding a lot of the reasons the Saints do the things they do, because a fan is looking at this and saying, "Hey, well, probably the best case scenario is we get draft Arch Manning, we do whatever." But no front office is going to walk into the building getting ready for the next season and say, "Well, this is the route to win the most games, and this is the route to lose the most games, and we know this. So we're going to do that one. We're going to actively make decisions to undermine our head coach who is trying to win football games in the National Football League by not making these sensible, obvious decisions that make us a better football team." You're not going to do that. And if you're being honest with yourselves, that's why you're mad, because they're doing that. They are trying to win games. And I get why people don't like it, but at the same time, I don't think it's that hard to justify if Kellen Moore's on board with it. Now, if Kellen Moore wasn't on board with it and Derek Carr was being forced onto him, which doesn't seem like it's the case, then that's a different scenario. But I just kind of feel like it's funny to me. Like, if Derek Carr was replaced by quarterback X, who a lot of people had not already decided they hated, regardless of what anything that happened, I don't think we would be looking at Spencer Rattler the same way. Like, I think the hype and the obsession with Spencer Rattler is directly related to the dislike of Derek Carr. I don't think the Saints, we could say the Saints need to find a new quarterback. I agree with that. That quarterback, if it's not Derek Carr, is not on the roster right now.
Correct. Yeah, and I think for me, like I said, I'm not sold either on the comments that are coming out the combine that, Derek Carr is the guy come week 1. I still think Mickey Loomis, Kellen Moore, they got their poker faces on. Maybe they are. They're on the phone exploring trades with other teams that are QB needy and don't want to be like, "Oh yeah, this guy's not part of our future."
Yeah, the only reason I disagree with that is, you have to make decisions soon.
Right.
You have to be cap compliant in 3 weeks. So if the route to getting to cap compliance is restructuring Derek's contract, that has to happen soon. And if you weren't going to do that, then you would be you would have a lot of moves you had to make. And that's the biggest difference to me is, and I put this out on Twitter. I retweeted it yesterday. I think I've broken it down on this podcast. It's all pretty straightforward, but if you have to clear about $47 million in cap space by March 12th, right? If you restructure Derek, you clear $30.1 million of that. If you use it all, you don't have to use it all, but you could.
Sorry, that was something you mentioned, with the cap space. While we just started this, I got an alert from ESPN that the official number that the cap has been set out, a record $279.2 million. So that is
always going to be a record. It goes up every year.
Yeah, up $23.8 million from last year.
Yeah. So again, if you restructure Derek, then you could get to cap compliance with 3 moves, and they are palatable moves in your restructuring Carl Granderson, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, 3 younger players who you are committed to for the foreseeable future, and you're not worried about it. If you don't restructure Derek, then you would have to restructure basically everyone, and that includes Taysom Hill, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu. So, and that's why, I know Mike Detillier was going off it's, you're just making the situation worse because Derek's cap hit would be $60 million next year. And I get why you say that, but at the same time, it's not new money. It's the same money that's now some more of it has been guaranteed, but you're kind of fitting that into the bucket of next year when you remove dead cap hits from Michael Thomas and Jameis Winston and Marshawn Lattimore. And so you can fit it all into that bucket. You could still release him as a post-June 1 cut and split that in half and make it a $30 million hit effectively over 2 seasons. And then you would also be in a position where you could move off of some of these other veteran players cleanly. So that's the difference to me. And that's why I said it from the jump. It was like you could clean up the cap in one of 2 ways. You can't do both ends. You can either clean it up at the quarterback position or you can clean it up everywhere else. And in one of those options, you have the quarterback you're paying. And in the other option, you are paying a lot of money to a quarterback who's not here. And so I don't think it's all that confusing why the Saints, if they're going to pay a quarterback, would like that quarterback to at least play for them. And that's where we are. Now, I get it. People aren't going to like it. You know, I think we're going to see more Fire Mickey Loomis hashtags out there. Like he's going to be the one who gets the grief for it, not Kellen Moore, unlike Dennis Allen, who got both ends. And we'll see if they go out and win games. No one's going to be mad about it.
I get it, too, from the fan base, Jeff, because, you know, the thought of Derek Carr, again, is still that tie to DA. And that's obviously forever going to be a thing.
I just wish he was more likable. I wish he tried more to be likable or understood how to be likable. I just don't think he has that gene in this. Like he was likable with the Raiders, but it was always like when you draft a quarterback and he's there for 10 years in Oakland and or however many years, it's like you're kind of commit. Like that's your home. That's where you are. Then they go to Vegas and it's kind of like, yeah, okay. Like it's a lot of fans from Oakland going there and it's a new market. So there's really no built connection with the players. So it's a little easier to filter in there. And I just don't know, like he came here and it just did not seem like he understood how to win anyone over. And he was more focused on being the quarterback. And I get that. But like there's been things that have happened. You know, I don't think that he's taken advantage of opportunities to put himself out there and to be that guy. And, you know, so he's kind of backed himself into a corner, painted himself into a corner of you either win games or you are going to be hated. There will be no, well, I like him, you know, so I'm going to look past some things. It is either he's elite or he's terrible and I hate him. And I don't think that's necessarily fair, but that's the scenario that he is in. And, you know, I think it would behoove himself. I think if he was willing to play ball on his contract a little bit, I think that would go a long way in terms of just the sentiment around him on this roster, because it would come off as he's a team guy. And I don't know, even if it's like nominal, even if it doesn't do ton, like just working with them to some level would probably come off positively is what I'm saying. For at least now the Carr soap opera continues with, you know, still some questions, you know, among, you know, the many for the Saints. But like you mentioned, that clock is definitely ticking and the deadline to get anything done is rapidly approaching. No joke. Yeah. And I expect we'll start to see moves in the next, you know, once they get back from the combine. All right. The only other thing on this that we'll hit here is, you know, the NFLPA grades came out. We're only mentioning it here because, you know, I thought it's actually kind of a glowing report card. I have a post up on WWL.com, kind of broke it down, tweeted about it as well, tweeted the grades. So go check that out at Jeff_Nowak. You can find it. The 2 worst grades the Saints got, they were 31st in the food area, the dining hall, whatever. And they were 29th in head coach sentiment or whatever you want to phrase that. And
check.
They climbed to 12th overall and they have already renovated their dining facility that is not represented in these grades because they were done before that was completed. So you would imagine that would climb, and it's a state-of-the-art facility. Kellen Moore, you asked Kellen Moore what he thought about the Saints facility when he was here with the Eagles getting ready for the Super Bowl, and that was the first thing he mentioned. I was like, yeah, I checked out the dining hall. It was fantastic. And I've checked it out. You know, I was able to kind of get a look at it when they re-upped their deal with Oshner, and it's beautiful. I've tried some of the offerings. They're very, very good. So I expect that will climb quickly. I don't know how high it'll go, but when that's your lowest grade and you have fixed it, that's a good sign in these grades. The other one was obviously the head coach. They fired that guy. So I don't know how the players will respond to Kellen Moore, but I highly doubt he'll be 29th. So, I think the Saints, all things considered, now they're I feel like the Dolphins are like paying off players to give them, because they got all A's,
A+ on everything, right?
Every category. The Vikings are similar, but they at least, they made it look real, where it's like, guys, give us a B somewhere so we don't have to answer. But there's some real negative ones in there. The Saints treatment of families grade was low, but I have a hard time gauging exactly what that is relative to. On the thing, it said like no daycare during games, which you probably should have daycare. That's probably something they got to figure out. But then like one of the notes was like not enough kind of family events, which I don't know. What is the team's responsibility to plan events for player families? So it is what it is. But like what I'll note, and it's the same thing that happened last year, is when I look through these grades and these notes, they're boring. There's really not a ton to pull out and say, well, this is notable. This is what we're talking about. And that means that, it's just the grade, which is tough to measure from team to team. It's not like, for example, last year, there was a note on the Bucs facility grade for their locker room that said they had bugs in the showers. This one, it said it still smells bad. It's like mildew and they have constant plumbing issues. Like, that's the type of stuff that's like, whatever your grade is, you don't want those notes.
And that's the home facility, the home facilities there. You've been to the away locker room. To me, it's a pathetic setting there.
Oh, it's an old, well, so I don't, so you're talking about the facility at the stadium.
Right. Just that I've seen.
I don't think the stadiums are great. It's weird. And I was wondering about this, like these grades are not relative to any of the stadium facilities. Like they're obviously the training staff and whoever works in these facilities went on game days. But like when they're talking about the locker room, they're talking about the kind of team facility locker room. So like the Saints locker room in Metairie is what's being graded, as opposed to the Saints locker room at the Superdome, which actually got a massive upgrade and is really not represented at all in these grades. So the Bucs stadium facilities are atrocious.
Yeah, to me, it was like an unfinished basement over there. I'm like, really? This is what you got?
It's an old stadium that doesn't feel like it needs to be old. Like there's nothing culturally significant about this stadium. They could just knock it down and build a new one. And everyone be like, thank you. It's kind of like the Georgia Dome in Atlanta. Like, just build a new stadium. You're just wasting everyone's time. But the other grade that I think, so we're talking about treatment of families, right? Yeah. The Bengals got a really bad treatment of families grade. There's a quote attributed to an anonymous player that described the treatment of family members as borderline disrespectful.
It's not good. But you know what? Overall, with these grades, how much do they mean? I think, what was it? The Kansas City Chiefs finished 26th, and your Super Bowl champion Eagles finished number 22 on the list. So meh. Yeah.
There is nothing even close to a direct correlation between getting graded high and winning at a high level. And honestly, there's actually more of a direct correlation at being graded low and winning at a high level. So
except the Jets, man.
Like the Dolphins got A's in everything, and they were terrible.
Like obviously, you said, it seems like they're definitely paying people off for those grades. Yeah, don't worry. We'll fill that out for you guys.
It kind of seems like unhappy players play better. I'm just saying. I don't know. Like maybe these players, when they're too coddled, don't play as well. That's what it seems. Because the Chiefs, like last year, the Chiefs promised their team that they were going to renovate the locker room, and then they came in for week one of the offseason training program, and the only change was they had chairs at their lockers, like little stools. And it was like, wait, you said you were going to fix this. You just gave us chairs. Anyway, but the Chiefs have been to 3 straight Super Bowls, and so they can complain all they want. As long as they're still winning, no one's going to take them seriously.
Anyway. Like you mentioned, to me, the most telling thing, look at those organizations that have been sad. Sorry, Bengals, you mentioned them. The New York Jets have been historically awful as well. And a lot more telling there. But, a huge positive, I think, for the Saints. mentioning the fact that the two biggest issues have already been addressed. And you look at maybe one of the most major ones to me, ownership. Ms. Benson got an A.
Yeah. And I also think the grades are more important for certain teams when it comes to attracting free agents than others, because the Saints New Orleans is never going to be, it's not hard for Kansas City to attract premium free agents. It's like,
right,
their selling point is we're going to go win a Super Bowl. Right? Like the Eagles are like, you can come here, like whatever, you can say what you want about our facility, but we win a lot of football games. The Saints, they have to sell the environment and the city and the culture, especially now without the Drew Brees, Sean Payton era. It's like you gotta sell people somehow. So I think these grades are actually helpful for the Saints more so than like the negative grades would be impactful for the Chiefs or even the Broncos or whatever. Like the Broncos didn't do well either. But let's wrap that up there. We'll come back. We have an interview we did on WWL with Lorenzo Neal, again, former Saints draft pick, fullback out of Fresno State, played for the Chargers, hosts Believe in Chargers podcast, where he talks a lot about the Chargers. So we chatted with him about Brandon Staley, Kellen Moore, obviously Derek Carr, and I thought he had some interesting things to say. So let's hit the break. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. We will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller coming at you on Thursday. It's a little later in the week than we would typically be recording a podcast, but wanted to wait to see what would come out of the combine with Kellen Moore, Mickey Loomis, Jeff Ireland, and all that good stuff. We didn't get a ton in terms of publicly available information, but there has been some reporting. Saints probably going to be active in free agency, whatever that means. Derek Carr sounds like he'll be back in 2025. But the good news is we still, all the information that was true last week is still true this week. And so I wanted to play for you this interview that we did on Sports Talk with Lorenzo Neal, former Saints draft pick, fullback out of Fresno State, played for the Chargers, hosts Believe in Chargers podcast. Obviously knows Brandon Staley, Kellen Moore, Derek Carr very well. So I thought he had a lot of interesting things to say. Let's hit it.
And we're now welcoming in a former Chargers fullback and also NFL legend, host of the Believe in Chargers podcast as well, Lorenzo Neal. Definitely appreciate the time. How the heck are you doing, Lorenzo?
Legendary, guys, legendary. Anywho, yeah, I love what you guys are doing there and then down there in New Orleans. Y'all don't realize that was the first place I got drafted, to the New Orleans Saints, and that's where I played 4 years of my young career with Dalton Hilliard and Sam Mills, Ricky Jackson, the Dome Patrol, so Jim Moore. So it all started for me in big Louisiana.
We also get to work with the legendary Bobby Hebert, and he talks a lot about those days for sure.
Oh, yeah, Bobby's amazing, man. I love Bobby. Bobby's got that voice, right, guys? It keeps you going.
Looking at the hire just recently, we'll get into with the defensive coordinator, Brandon Staley. Just wondering what you can tell us about his time with the Chargers. Obviously, things didn't end the way that he wanted to over there. But just what kind of defense maybe we can expect him to bring to this Saints squad?
Well, I think you got to be smart to play in this defense. I mean, Brandon Staley, you saw what he did with the Rams. They were able to win a Super Bowl. We know that he can coach X's and O's, and he's a guy I think is a great defensive coordinator. Some people question maybe is he a fit for a head coach, and I think that's why when you look at what the Saints have done, when you go out and you hire, Kellen Moore, where was he come from? Think about it. San Diego. He got the Chargers, the LA Chargers. Excuse me. But that's where he was with coach. So you have two guys that have some familiarity, and you brought in a head coach that was the head coach that you worked with. You brought him in. Why? You brought him in that he can also teach you how to be a head coach in Kellen Moore. So that is going to be a great confidant for Coach Kellen Moore that you guys hired as the head coach. I think that you're going to have a great working relationship with him and Staley.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Staley as a defensive coach? Because I think people talk about Brandon. It's all going to go back to the head coaching tenure didn't go that well, and we saw with Dennis Allen, he was a great defensive coordinator. He got the head coaching job. It didn't go particularly well, but not every great defensive coach is meant to be a head coach. It's just the skill sets are very different. And
no question.
I think a lot of people look at it and be like, well, he failed as a coach. I'm like, well, actually, in 2020, he had the Rams. He installed a defense over Zoom. They couldn't even meet, and he had that team as the number one defense in the NFL. So there's a lot of actual success that you can point to on the defensive side of the ball. So what are your thoughts on the type of scheme he runs, the type of defense he puts on the field?
Yeah, I think that you guys know that offense entertains, but defense wins championships, and he's going to be a 4-3 guy. He's got to go 4 down. You've seen what he was able to do. He did a great job with the Rams. You said when you have players, look, if all things being equal, players are going to make plays, but coaches make decisions to help determine outcome of the game. You got to have some players that execute. You show me a great coach, I'll tell you what, he's got some great players. All I think about, Patrick Mahomes and Brady. When you got a great coach, yeah, coaches get a lot of praise, but when you have great players around, it makes it happen. And Staley is a good coach. I think that he's one of those coaches. He knows X's and O's to have a defense that's going to be a solid defense if you can get him the right guys to execute his plan. Look no further than look at Spagnuolo, look at Spags over there in Kansas City. Not a great head coach, but look what Spags has done as a defensive coordinator for Kansas City Chiefs. Look at Vic Fangio. Hey, this guy, they motorboated the Kansas City Chiefs. He wasn't a great head coach. I knew Vic. Vic spent days in New Orleans. Knew him at the Niners, a defensive coordinator. Look how well. Took the Niners to a Super Bowl. Lost to the Hardball Bowl. So you got to look at certain guys. They're great defensive coordinators, but they're just not great head coaches. Look at North Turner. The list goes on, guys, that there's a lot of guys out there, and I think you got a good one in Staley, who is a really good defensive coordinator, and just the question's still out about being a head coach.
Yeah, you mentioned with not everybody is a great head coach. We're kind of expecting that to happen with Dennis Allen moving on to Chicago, probably ignite that Bears defense over there after spending time here. Looking at the youth now movement with this coaching staff with the Saints, what were your impressions with that one season that Kellen Moore did spend with the Chargers?
Yeah, I thought that you saw that he absolutely, Justin Herbert loved Kellen Moore. I mean, this guy comes from Boise. He was a Boise player and watched him play in college. And he's just one of those guys that he knows X's and O's, a great offensive coordinator, a great offensive mind. He had a great year with Justin Herbert. He is going to come in there and he is going to help Carr. He's going to help whoever is at the quarterback position. Hopefully it's Derek Carr, Fresno State legend as well. So I hope it's him. But Kellen Moore is going to make sure the quarterback is going to be successful. He's going to get the ball out of his hands, going to have the quarterback knowing where to go with the ball. You guys got to find offensive coordinator. The verdict is still out, but can he be a head coach? But you know what? You got to start somewhere. There's a lot of guys that just first-time head coaches that can do pretty well. So I think Kellen Moore, great offensive mind. You're going to saw what he did wherever he goes. He has success, especially with the offensive side of the ball. But now you have a head coach, but also now offensive coordinator. So it's going to depend what he does. Is he going to be willing to give up the reins to another offensive coordinator because now he's a head coach? And I think that's one of those reasons also that he brought in Coach Staley to help him micromanage and understand what it takes to be a head coach.
Lorenzo, you just brought it up. I was going to ask you, as a Fresno State guy, there's some Fresno State connections here. Even Jordan Mims, a running back for Fresno State, obviously Derek Carr. Yeah, Doug Nussmeier. Yes. People might not know Doug Nussmeier actually spent a year as an offensive coordinator for Fresno State. So there's a lot of Bulldog pride in New Orleans these days. And so I'm curious, obviously I'm sure you've followed Derek Carr for a long time. What are your thoughts on him as a starting quarterback and what he's done and where he is at this point? Because that's going to be a big question for the Saints. It's a big cap hit. You're changing coaching regimes. Do you try to move on at the quarterback position? Do you stick with him? What are your thoughts on Derek?
Well, I think right now, if you're going to get someone in the draft, is he going to be ready? That's the question, and that's what's tough. Because if you get someone say, okay, we're going to go all in and get a rookie, is he going to be ready for that first year? You need a Derek Carr because he's a guy that's not necessarily – there's different type of quarterbacks, Mahomes. You look at Josh Allen. You look at, when you think about Cincinnati's, the Bengals, you watch Joe Burrows, Joe Cool. Look around the league. There are certain type of guys that are game changers, and then there's game managers. There are certain types of guys. There's a difference between a thermostat and a thermometer. See, a thermometer, all it does is just measure temperature. Thermostat, it regulates temperature. I don't know if Derek Carr is that type of player. I know he's a good player. He's not a great he's not an elite quarterback, but he can win games, but everything needs to be good around him. So that's the thing. If you're looking for a guy, if that's the thing you're looking for with Carr, then you don't have that in Derek Carr. Now you have a guy that can win I'm not saying he can go out and carry a team, but he's not that type of quarterback, but he can win it. He's good enough to win a Super Bowl if everything around him is good.
Yeah, I had someone say this to me once, and I think it lands in this situation, which is like, no one gets excited about the 15th best quarterback in the NFL until you don't have a top 15 quarterback, and then that's the only thing you need, and suddenly you don't have it, right?
Right. You know what? You hit the nail right on the head. What do you want, Geno Smith? I mean, what are you going to upgrade? And no disrespect, but there's just a lot of guys out there. They're just guys. You have a guy at the top, like you said, top 15 quarterback. He's not the elitist of the elitists, but he can win. But if you go out there now and just say, hey, we're going to get rid of him, you're going to take some growing pains either or, no matter what. So do you go draft a guy and say, look, a year or two, or do you say, look, we're going to reboot and start all over all the time?
Lorenzo, I want to ask you about the fullback position. It seems like you guys are a dying breed lately in the NFL. What's going on with the overall? And do you think there's still a place in this league? I think we've seen it. We need you big guys helping pave the way out there, and it just seems like a position that's really been sought after, like not even thought about anymore.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think when you look at Cal Juszczyk and look at some of the guys that play the position, it's not that it's not a glamorous position. You understand that. And to play fullback, you got to be different. And I think that's the biggest thing. When you're a fullback, you got to be able to move people. And that's what I did. When I went out there and you saw certain guys, you watched not just myself, but you look at guys like Sam Gash and the Moose and Moose Johnson, Larry Centers. You watch guys that got downhill. Was you guys had one, Suggs, T. Smith that played there a while back. You got to have guys that want to go in there and move guys out of the way. And I think it's going to start to come back because you saw this year 2 running backs put the running back position back on the map, and which was long overdue. So I hopefully, with that being said, the fullback position starts to come back this way because I'm telling you, man, back in the day when I played, you guys knew. I mean, Larry Centers, you think about Tony Richardson, Kansas City, all these great fullbacks that you had, Mike Allstott. We need the fullbacks. We need to make fullbacks great again. Juszczyk is still carrying the torch so for us, guys. Cal Juszczyk's going to carry that torch.
Awesome stuff, Lo. Definitely appreciate the time. Thanks so much, and hopefully be seeing you down here soon enough in New Orleans.
Absolutely. We'll do it again soon, guys. Cheers.
All right. Thanks again to Lorenzo Neal. A lot of interesting stuff there. We're going to talk about Brandon Staley more in the final segment, but I did think what Lorenzo said there and what I think is true is like people are going to look at, man, things didn't go well with the Chargers, and they didn't objectively. But I think when you look at Dennis Allen's tenure as a Saints head coach, it's not just that he did poorly as a head coach. It was that his defense suffered.
Right.
Every year it got worse when he was a head coach. And that was different from when he was the defensive coordinator and everything. It seemed like everything was like building to something. As a head coach, it seemed like it was crumbling. And I think that's just, that happens is when you add the head coach responsibilities to a star defensive coordinator's plate, a lot of the things that make you a star defensive coordinator, you're not able to do anymore. And your focus is drawn in other areas and that impacts you. And I think that's what the Saints are hoping is true for Brandon Staley, because when you look at Brandon Staley's statistics as a defensive coordinator with the Rams, they are as elite as they come. Now, that defense had Aaron Donald and a lot of pieces to work with. And the group he took over with the Chargers, while there were some star players on there, it was not as well constructed for what he needed to do. You didn't see the results that you would like to see going, down the street, right? Like they played in the same building. It's not like he had to relocate or anything like that would draw his attention that way. So, I think the Saints are hoping that fact is true, that defensive coordinators not succeeding as a head coach does not mean that you cannot come back and be an elite defensive coordinator. And I think it's true. I think it's a good bet because I think Dennis Allen's going to be good with the Bears. We've seen Steve Spagnuolo be a great defensive coordinator with the Chiefs. Obviously, that year he spent here, just kind of throw that out with the bathwater. And
gee, what if that was personnel related?
Yeah, maybe. But that's the problem is I don't know if he has the personnel here, just like he didn't in LA. So we'll see how it goes. But I think people are overreacting to the idea that things didn't go well with the Chargers when I don't really think that's I think that is kind of disconnected from you're not hiring to be a head coach. You're hiring him to be your defensive coordinator. And he has shown that as a defensive coordinator on an offensive head coach's staff, he can succeed. So,
yeah, the biggest concern for me with Staley, at least, I've just heard his scheme's kind of complicated. Worry about the verbiage being a little, too complex for the players. We'll see how it works out. But like you mentioned, the fact that his failures as a head coach, I'm not really looking too much into that becoming back to a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, you rely on smart players. You need smart players. And I think the Saints have smart players. You're right. I don't think that's the issue. It's more so just what they have done is not going to match what they're being asked to do. So it's great if you understand what you're being asked to do, but can you do it physically? And that's going to be the other question. But, great stuff from Lorenzo. I thought his comments on Derek Carr were good as well. Again, and this is what I said to Lorenzo and he agreed with, you don't get excited. You don't get excited about the 15th best quarterback until you don't have a top 15 quarterback, and, a replacement level quarterback. And I've said this about Kirk Cousins. He's Mr. League Average. There's a reason that he's stuck around in the league so long, because league average can win you games.
Right.
Below league average? No. And it's not hard to identify when you start to see below league average. But
we got a taste of it with Spence. As much as people want to be on the Rattler bandwagon. Sorry, it was a rough campaign for him.
So I think it's different for a rookie. When you're talking about was he league average for what you can expect out of a rookie? Maybe. It's tough because I don't go and watch every rookie quarterback. Some rookies are 5th round picks. Some rookies are 1st round picks. Your bell curve is going to be a little harder to match, but you definitely didn't get league average in terms of what a veteran quarterback would provide. Now that's one of the problems with the NFL is
a lot of missed targets stood out for me with Spence's accuracy.
Oh yeah. He was erratic. The touch on the throws wasn't necessarily what you'd want, especially when you're throwing to you don't need to throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball to a running back who's 8 feet from you, that sort of thing. Yeah, but that is also the problem I have with quarterback conversations in the NFL. It's either they are ready to be a week 1 starting quarterback right now or throw them out their trash. Yeah,
you have to be Jaden Daniels, man.
Right, and guys like Jaden Daniels ruin the curve for everybody else. But why is it such a crazy idea that you let a guy sit for 2-3 years and suddenly it's hey, let's see if he can, he's going to be learning the second offense in 2 seasons. Jake Hayner's going to be learning his third offense in 3 seasons if you keep him around. Young quarterbacks don't get chances to develop in the modern NFL. And part of it's because you don't keep 3 or 4 quarterbacks on the roster the way you used to. And so you need that young quarterback to be your backup. And a lot of times teams would rather have a veteran backup. Yeah. And we saw this year why.
Yeah, look at guys like a Jared Goff or a Sam Darnold and their progression. I'm honestly not a fan of either, but you can't deny their stats this past definitely the past couple of years for Goff.
Yeah, the issue is when it's hard to compare a young quarterback, a young
mid-round
pick to those guys because it was the Jared Goff was the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold was 3rd? So it's they're going to get time to develop because their team doesn't have any choice but to play them. Whether you think Spencer Rattler should have been picked higher, your draft status, where you were picked, is going to impact how much investment the team sees in you and what the sunken cost is and how much they feel we have to give this guy time. And I'm curious to see what Kellen Moore has in store for Spencer. If he's a Spencer Rattler guy at all, there's no guarantee that he is. Maybe they go and draft a young guy. Maybe they go and draft a Jalen Milroe when he becomes the project quarterback and Spencer's kind of put out to pasture. I don't know. We'll see.
At least Spencer was around for Super Bowl. I'll just say that.
See, Spencer has the fans behind him. I'll give him that. He definitely has a hive, or a nest, rather.
Even though, like, I guess you could say he falls under the Clint Kubiak reign now, and that's over with.
Well, right, and Jake Haener falls under the Pete Carmichael tree. Like,
right.
Spencer Rattler is now in the situation Jake Haener was in last year, where it's like, well,
the head coach didn't pick him.
I don't even know. Like, I'm sure they've met. I'm sure Kellen has met with Spencer, and he's under contract, so he'll be here through camp one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's just a question of, like again, it's just like last year, Jake Haener stuck around even though they drafted Spencer, but it was very clear throughout the season that Spencer was, the golden child of that situation. Jake was never going to get a fair, even shot at that job, no matter what was said. And that was clear in the one time they decided to start him and yanked him at halftime. And like, you understand why. And that will be the case again if the Saints go out and draft a mid-round quarterback. It's not going to be Spencer getting the benefit of the doubt. It'll be the other guy. Because
I will say at least it's a benefit for a guy like a Haener too. Again, it's like, sure, he's got another offense to learn, but another clean slate for him going into this year.
They don't even, this coaching staff is like, who is this guy? Maybe he'll go, maybe the Eagles, maybe they'll cut him and the Eagles will claim it on waivers and he can go hang out with Ian Book.
Super Bowl oh no, yeah. Ian
Super
Book
Bowl champion Ian Book.
Yeah, right, along with Kenny Pickett. Mind blown.
Man, what a rough run of quarterbacks. But all right, let's wrap this segment up. We're going to come back. We'll talk more about the defensive coaches that have been hired, some combine news and notes, some mock draft information. Stick around. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. One more segment here. And, the combine, it's this week. It's really kicking off today with the workouts and obviously these interviews that have been done with teams and players. And, there's people are going to be like, oh, so which so-and-so team met with so-and-so? And I'm like, basically every team meets with every player.
Exactly. I'm curious, we get so much inside looks now between the NFL Network or, with the workouts being broadcast on there. Are they ever going to go inside the interview room? Because that's the most intriguing part.
Well, some like last year Hard Knocks did. So whatever team, whatever team gets, I don't know if they're doing the offseason Hard Knocks again. Last year was the Giants, obviously. Yeah. And they did. And we saw their interviews with Drake May and Jaden Daniels, and those got parsed into oblivion. And some people decided that Jaden Daniels was bad because of some of his answers in that media session. And then it turned out not that bad. So yeah, no, I mean, it would be cool to get more of that information, but I'm sure teams are like, no, why would I ever give you that information? This is stuff that I have, and I'm not going to share with you because how would I possibly benefit from that? And like, even like the Hard Knocks thing, it was like, okay, well, we'll let you share that after the draft, So it is what it is, but yeah, I think that there's this level of like, people are like, oh, I have this information, I'm going to post it as if it's news. And it's like, Mason Graham met with the Patriots. Like, no shit.
Really?
You think they're not going to meet with him? You think they're going to be like, not worth it? Like, the Saints are going to meet with Cam Ward. They're not going to draft Cam Ward.
I don't know if you saw I don't know who put the clip out, but Shedeur Sanders was walking around and one of the hats attached to his backpack was the New Orleans Saints. So it was like, oh, he's keeping his options open for, all these teams. Well, of course he is.
You think?
Yeah,
he doesn't get to decide. Maybe he just likes the Florida Lee. It's a cool hat, guys. But yeah, so it is what it is. This is the time of year where people get, there's this kind of, there's a lot of information, but there's also no actionable information. So people want to interpret everything and like, they're like, well, what if this means this and this and this?
I do love draft night when, one of the first questions someone will get asked is, oh, how did your initial conversations go with the Saints? And, the draft pick that says, oh, I never had any contact with them.
Well, that was Fuaga last year. It
Right,
was
yeah.
we didn't meet with him. And some of the but that's only kind of true. Like, again, everyone at the Senior Bowl meets with everybody. So like they had met with Fuaga at the Senior Bowl. A lot of times it's like, oh, did you take a top 30 visit here? And they'll say no. And the Saints tend to use their top 30 visits as like information gathering of guys they aren't sure about. And the way Dennis Allen explained it was like, well, we didn't have any questions about this guy. It was like, if he's there, we're taking him. So why are we going to waste our top 30 visit on a guy that we know if he's anyway? Like you're not gaining anything other than if we draft him, we're getting all that information anyway. So yeah, but so we mentioned Brandon Staley in the last segment. He's going to be the new defensive coordinator, and what that means is the Saints will be transitioning to some sort of hybrid 3-4 scheme. I don't know if Brandon's going to bring in the exact scheme he ran with the Chargers or the Rams, if he's going to adjust it. I've spent some time going through some Chargers games, some Rams games, and there's a lot going on in these defenses, and there's some unique blitzes. But what it needs is like defensive backs that are comfortable kind of roaming and changing and disguising. And a guy like Derwin James is really, I think even though the defenses weren't great, Derwin James was a perfect fit for that system in terms of what he was able to do. And so I think it's interesting, but I think, as much as the Saints want to be active in free agency, I think the only way that you get to the point that you are running a successful defense and have kind of transitioned is you do it through the draft and you do it through developing young players. And that's why I think the hires they've made have been telling. You look at the offensive side of the ball and it's all NFL assistants or whatever coming in from other programs of Doug Nussmeier and TJ Paginetti from the Eagles, Joel Thomas from the Giants, Brendan Nugent. I don't know where he was last year, but he was with the Chargers prior to that. There's one more that I'm blanking on. But either way, like that, you went for NFL assistants on the offensive side. On the defensive side, all college coaches under Brandon Staley so far. So you have Terry Joseph, who spent, he's been in the college ranks forever. He was with Texas the last 4 years, obviously a lot of success there. Bo Davis, who's the defensive line coach at LSU last year, has had several other stops. He has had coaching stints in the NFL as well, but primarily in college. He'll be your defensive line coach. And then Peter Sermon, who was the defensive coordinator at Cal for the last several years, he's coming over as your linebackers coach. And so what that says to me is the Saints are going to prioritize development on the defense. And you got 9 picks to make if you make all of them. And I would expect a majority will come on the defensive side of the ball. Now, Terry Joseph in particular, I find interesting because one of the guys that I think would fit Brandon Staley's scheme very, very well in terms of being kind of that zone corner with some inside flex, can play the nickel, can do whatever, is Jahdae Barron, who's the Walter Thorpe winner for this past year, developed at Texas under Terry Joseph. If he's on the board at 40, he's my guy. If he's on the board at 35, he's a guy that I would consider doing the Kool-Aid McKinstry trade and going up again. Like, I think that if he is in there in the mix early in round 2, he's not a guy I'd take at 9. Now, Will Johnson out of Michigan, maybe, but I don't know. I think that might be a bit of a reach. I think there might be better options on the board. So if Jahdae Barron, who I have his position coach on my staff already, is available, and this guy's banging the table for him, I think there's a good chance he ends up in New Orleans. So those are the type of things that when you're hiring a bunch of college coaches, it becomes really easy to look at and say, like, okay, who are some of the players they worked with and who are they going to be championing when they get to that point of the draft? I think Jahdae Barron is a guy that you now have to take, because of that hire, very, very seriously.
The big thing for me is, and we've talked about this as well, it's like, how much of the shift is going to be in this scheme now? Because, we've been so accustomed to seeing the DA way of doing things, and that doesn't look at all at what, a guy like Brandon Staley's done in the past. And pretty interesting that he's coming off the Vic Fangio tree. And obviously that's a bit of an eye-opener for Saints fans who love the Dome Patrol for good reason. And the fact that Fangio's coming off a Super Bowl victory, he's got the horses over there in Philly that the Saints, they got to build up the stable over here.
I still think you should go after Zach Bond, man. I do. I really do. I don't think he hated it here. I think maybe there was some frustration with Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen's gone. So if he did appreciate the city and the program and the franchise, why not take a run at him?
I just feel like that price tag is going to be so inflated now for him. I don't know if the Saints are in that running.
But you need that player.
I hear you.
So you're going to be willing to pay more for a player that you need than you would have for a player that, wasn't a scheme fit for you. So I don't know, just something to keep in mind. Like I would go pay Zach Bond.
Well, he hasn't forgotten the smell of things here. That's for sure.
Still knows the smell. Still the smells bring something back. There's a lot to talk about the combine. The problem is a lot of it's going to be, I think when we talk about the combine and when all these podcasts go out, this guy, like the drills are important, but they're not that important. Like
that's why guys don't take part in them, right?
Well, I mean, I think we need something to talk about. So we look at a 40 and we're like, oh my God, he's so fast. Or you look at these 3-cone drills or, he's so many bench press reps. I jump so high. And I'm like, yeah, the athleticism is important, but the most important thing that happens is teams sit for 20 minutes with a player and ask him questions and kind of get to know what makes him tick and sniff the pits, as Thomas Dimitroff so visually. I
said eloquently.
Yes. But that's information we don't get. So we spend time talking about this and that. Like a guy like Shadur Sanders isn't working out. Ashton Jeanty isn't working out. Like so many of these guys aren't working out. So watching the actual drills is only you're not getting a lot of it. Abdul Carter is a stress fracture in his foot. So that's a big deal. I don't think it's going to drop his draft stock enough for the Saints to have anything to say about it. But it's definitely, if you're considering taking him, if I'm the Titans, I'm like,
a little bit of a ding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, man, it's never a good sign when, you're talking about number 1 overall pick or a number 3 overall pick or whatever. He's already dealing with an injury. And now you're glad you get it sorted out early. Like we saw Juwan Johnson have a stress fracture in his foot and not miss any time. So it's really more of a get it fixed. But the problem is you're a team that isn't able to manage. Like it's not a team yet. So he's managing that injury on his own, and it won't be until the team drafts him or at least has him in for a visit that they can even get an idea of how that looks from their perspective. If he doesn't take the treatment route that they will have wanted him to take 3 months from now, they can't go back in time and say, well, we'd rather you did it this way. Because it doesn't sound like he's going to have surgery. It sounds like he's trying to rehab it manually. And I think most teams would err on the side of guy, just have the surgery. That's very much a college thing versus a pro thing. Is NFL teams will almost always be like, if there is a surgical route and there's like a 90-something% chance that it heals fine without surgery, the team will almost always be like, just get the surgery. We're paying for it. We have world-class surgeons and we're going to get it fixed. Whereas I think a college student would, and Mike Thomas was always like, I don't want to have surgery. And that's part of what led to that whole saga of the ankle didn't heal right. And then he got the surgery and his ankle rejected the hardware, and it became this long-term thing that if you just got it handled right away, probably would have been different. So I don't know. I'm definitely, when you see stuff like that, it's definitely like, okay, that's not how you want to start things.
Yeah. We'll see what lies ahead. But I think you mentioned that the fact that these personal interviews are the biggest thing. You have all this tape of these players that you have your sights set on, and a lot more telling in those type of football scenarios than controlled environments where guys are just going through drills and some aren't taking part in these drills.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a scout, I still want to see these guys go through the drills, and it annoys the hell out of me that every year it seems like the top 15 picks aren't.
Oh, but they'll be doing something at their pro day.
Oh, cool. Yeah, great. So they'll be running with like a tailwind downhill. Yeah, like I just think, it's like go compete, go do something. Like to me, it's like the only reason you wouldn't do the work is because you think you're going to look bad. Because if you look good, it helps you. Right. And I don't know. It comes off to me as like afraid of competition. But at the same time, you look at last year, all these guys skipped workouts and they all still, Marvin Harrison Jr. still went number 4 overall and whatnot. Like, if it's not impacting these guys at all and no team is going to be like, yeah, well, I don't like that he didn't work out, so I'm not going to draft him, then
it goes, I get it too with the fear or risk of injury that guys are concerned with too. Why should I?
Come on, these are just, if you're afraid of hurting yourself during these drills, and you're going to be afraid of every football thing you ever do. Anyway, one guy that I do think is going to work out is Mike Detillier's draft pick in his mock draft, who he passed on Will Johnson in his mock draft. Will Campbell. There is a Will Johnson, but that's a different guy. He passed on Will Campbell, the top tackle, to take Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State. There's been a lot of buzz around Tyler Warren as a potential pick for the Saints. And I think it's interesting because the Saints haven't taken a top 10 tight end ever. They haven't taken a first-round tight end since Irv Smith in like 1993. He would be the highest tight end taken since Cam Cleland in 1998. And I'm doing this all from memory, guys. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But Cam Cleland is the most recent tight end drafted prior to the 3rd round, and it was like 18 years ago. The Saints have taken 3rd-round tight ends. They took Jimmy Graham in the 3rd round. They took Adam Troutman in the 3rd round. Other than that, there's basically been nobody. So projecting the Saints to take Tyler Warren at number 9 is projecting the Saints to buck every tight end drafting tradition they have set since the current regime was in place.
And also the fact that I don't feel like we typically see tight ends going that high. Unless you're the Atlanta Falcons.
You're in luck because I looked this up.
All right.
Like you'll get tight ends in the 1st round.
Yeah.
You very rarely get tight ends in the top 10. And everyone will point to, Brock Bowers. Look what Brock Bowers did. And that's fair. 13th.
Oh, 13th. Okay. He
was picked 13th. He was picked right before the Saints. And a lot of people think the Saints were going to pick Brock Bowers if he fell one more pick, and we'll never know. But he was picked 13th. So Brock Bowers was picked 4 spots later than Tyler Warren. And that was a very top-heavy draft. There was a ton of quarterbacks, so that pushed a lot of guys down the board. At that point, there had not been a single defensive player taken. Right? So you had, 6 quarterbacks in the 1st round, and then you had several offensive linemen. So, it's kind of an interesting dynamic of like, okay, in last year's draft, where would Tyler Warren have gone? And it would probably been after Brock Bowers, so you'd probably be talking about mid to late 1st, but that's the deal. You can only get drafted in the year you're getting drafted. But even then, like, everyone's like, Brock Bowers, he had a great rookie season. He elevated that team to 4 whole wins. So, like, my question is, what are you hoping to get out of a Tyler Warren or even an Ashton Genty, right? Like, when we talk about these skill players who don't, you typically don't see in the top 10, do you expect them to elevate this team? Or is it going to be a 3-year window where, hey, we're terrible anyway, but we have a really good tight end? And so you mentioned, you don't see a lot of 1st-round tight ends, period. You definitely don't see a lot of top 10 tight ends. And so let's go back. Brock Bowers was the 1st-round tight end last year. He went number 13 overall. He was the only 1st-round tight end. 2023, Dalton Kincaid, he went number 25 overall to the Bills. I would say he's not even the best tight end in that draft because I think Sam Laporta is that. 2022, there was none. 2021, Kyle Pitts went number 4 overall. I wouldn't exactly point to that as a success story.
No, definitely not.
2020, Cole Kmet was the 1st off the board. He was the 2nd-round pick. 2019, TJ Hawkinson, 8th overall. He's been great with the Vikings. The problem is he was drafted by the Lions. 2018, Hayden Hurst was a first-round pick, 25th overall. 2017, OJ Howard was 19th overall. Evan Engram was 23rd overall. David Njoku was 29th overall, so basically a second-round pick. The only one of them who has been good is David Njoku. Evan Engram has been pretty good for the Jaguars. The problem is he was drafted by the Giants. 2016, no first-round pick. 2015, no first-round pick. 2014, Eric Ebron, Lions. Okay, 10th overall pick. 2013, Tyler Eifert, 21st overall. Kobe Fleener was the first taken in 2012. Saints fans will remember Kobe Fleener. He was a second-round pick. 2011, Kyle Rudolph was a second-round pick. He was the first off the board. 2010, Jermaine Gresham, first-round pick, 21st overall. 2009, Brandon Pettigrew was a first-round pick, 20th overall. Dustin Keller was a first-round pick, 30th overall in 2008. 2007, Greg Olson was a first-round pick, 31st overall. Vernon Davis, first-round pick, number 6th overall. And I would argue that Vernon Davis is the only example of all of these picks, not named Brock Bowers, to be elite for the for the team that drafted them. And I mean, so David Njoku, you say, okay, he's up there as well, but he was a late first-round pick. So of the top 10 picks in this list, you have Vernon Davis in 2006, 6th overall. You have TJ Hawkinson. Oh, sorry, there was one more. Oh, you have Eric Ebron at number 10 to the Lions. You have TJ Hawkinson at number 8 to the Lions. So the Lions are a team that likes to take tight ends. Then you have Kyle Pitts, number 4 overall. That's your list. Those are the top 10 tight ends in the last 20 years. So to take Tyler Warren at number 9 overall, you would have to be saying like he is one of the best tight end prospects in the last 2 decades. Full well knowing that the hit rate on a top 10 tight end is like 1 in 3.
I know some are trying to compare him to an upgrade or replacement for a guy like Taysom Hill because, the fact that Warren was used a lot in that Joker role in college.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Tyler Warren's a great player. I think my issue is number 9. And right. And in Mike Detilliers' draft, for example, Will Campbell's on the board. You're telling me you're staring at the top tackle in the draft and Tyler Warren is your pick? I don't buy that. I think you're taking, you need the offensive line to be right. And I just you're not looking at Trevor Penning and saying we're set. At least I'm not. So
I know some of the reports from the combine, though, were saying that it sounds like the Saints are committed to keeping him at tackle and not even bumping Trevor inside. So I don't know what the philosophy or belief is right there with that tackle spot.
I mean, I think that changes if you draft a premier tackle.
Yeah.
I think what that means
does maybe Campbell move inside then? I don't know.
With all things being equal, yeah, he's your right tackle because you don't have a better option. If you have a better option, you have a better option. You're going to try to find a way to get him on the field. But he's not going to be your right guard. Cesar Ruiz your right guard. He could be your left guard, but I don't know. I'd like a better option there too. So I don't know. And I feel the same way about running back. I do. And I think there's, Travion Henderson, I think is really intriguing as a 2nd or 3rd round pick. When you're a bad team, taking a running back is like the classic mistake in the top 10. The only example of a top 5 running back or a top 10 running back in recent years that has actually changed the fortunes of a bad team is Leonard Fournette. And they went to the AFC Championship that year with Blake Bortles, which is still crazy in retrospect. They should have been in the Super Bowl. They were up 10 points in the second half on the Patriots and they lost. But even he was kind of laughed out of town. They didn't even pick up his 5th-year option. And then he went to Tampa Bay and won a Super Bowl for them. Drafting a top 10 running back as a bad team is basically just drafting the Super Bowl champion star running back 5 years from now. The Eagles benefited, the Bucks benefited from Leonard Fournette more than the Jaguars did. The Falcons benefited. I was going to say, even that list of tight ends you went through, how many ended up on different teams and having their main success there? Most of them,
right?
Like TJ Hawkinson, great. He's on the Vikings now. Hayden Hurst, like that was one of the weirder picks of the last decade because they immediately went they drafted Mark Andrews the same year, and Mark Andrews was way better, and they played Mark Andrews, and it was like you spent a first round pick on Hayden Hurst. Why? So I don't know. Yes, you want to hit home runs in the draft. If you feel like you have a home run caliber player, yes, I get it. You want to go get him. But unless he was like the last guy on that tier on my board in the top 10, like I'm going to prioritize a tackle. I'm going to prioritize a lot of other positions. So we'll see. But then again, there's something to be said for putting an exciting team on the field. And there was several years there that I would watch the Giants specifically to watch Saquon Barkley. They weren't very good with him, but I was confident that throughout the course of the game, he would do something that would make it worth watching. Thus, I watched. So I don't know. Maybe that is the case. Maybe bringing in an Ashton Jeanty and getting people excited. And I do, if you've noticed, it seems like every other time I say the name, I pronounce it differently. I need to figure out exactly how to say his name, whether it's Genty or Ginty.
I think it's Genty, but I'm not positive either.
I think it's Genty too, but I always halfway through a sentence, when I start a sentence with Genty, I say it correctly. When I hit it halfway through a sentence, I say Ginty. But hey, it would put butts in seats, and maybe that's what I'm after right now. And
there is the Boise State connection.
Yeah, people keep saying that. It's funny because there is a Boise State connection, and we talked about this yesterday, that I actually do think will actually change the fate of someone on this roster. I don't think you can justify taking a running back in the top 10 because he went to the same college as your head coach. That would be terrible drafting. If that's even a thought, fire everyone in the room.
I guess if he had this great relationship with him, I don't know. And, we heard with that interview he did with the Saints media staff that they posted, like if that comes up where he's on the clock and they're picking at 9, he's like, Kellen Moore said, I might have to leave the room.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure he's watched him the same way Lorenzo Neal watched Derek Carr at Fresno State, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think that can be, if we're talking about a second round pick and it's like, I like this guy, he went to my school, like that's, you could probably sell me on that. Like top 10, there's no way that's a factor. Now, if it's because he's the star running back that you think your team needs, that's something. All that said, there's a guy who I think, and we talked about this yesterday, when I looked at Cedric Wilson early in the coaching search, I was like, you could save $2.4 million against salary cap by cutting Cedric Wilson. That seems like a no-brainer move to me. Now, with Kellen Moore as a head coach, I kind of feel completely differently, which is like, okay, $2.4 million, that's not worth it. Because I look at Cedric Wilson and I see a former Boise State Bronco, who Kellen Moore is a big fan of, who spent 4 years on the Cowboys in Kellen Moore's offense and is now a guy who can come back to the Saints and be a bridge player from the coach to the roster in both directions because he knows the roster, he knows the wide receiver room, and he also knows Kellen Moore's offense. And I think players like that are worth their, you'll pay him more for a player like that. And you just happen to have one on the roster already. There's nothing more productive you're going to do with $2.4 million than find a veteran player who does not have an ego and is willing to come in and do any of the dirty work stuff you need, already has a good relationship with the roster itself, with the wide receiver room, and knows the offense that's coming in and can help the young players in the wide receiver room pick up that offense. Like, he's not going anywhere. I would be stunned. I've done a complete... I always say like 360, but 360 would be all the way back around in the same spot. I've done a complete 180 on Cedric Wilson from like 3 weeks ago. Because with Kellen Moore, it makes no sense to get rid of him.
Yeah, and I mean, we didn't see much from him last year. It was kind of a disappointment, but you mentioned the familiarity and, been there, done that with Kellen. So it seems like a nice little bridge to help convey the message to the rest of the guys on the offense.
What are you talking about? He was the most efficient quarterback the Saints had last year. He does. There's clips. He's thrown touchdowns with the Cowboys too, in a very similar way to what he threw. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the play that Clint Kubiak drew up for Cedric Wilson's touchdown was cribbed from Kellen Moore's Cowboys playbook, where he threw a touchdown as kind of the wide X and then just across the field. Just saying. He didn't. It wasn't. Actually, it wasn't a touchdown. It was just a long completion to CeeDee Lamb. But
I'm looking though. In 6 passing attempts, he's been sacked 3 times.
Well, that's because he's smart. That's because he knows not to throw into a bad look. You gotta have that. Because like there's been, I think it was in the playoffs. In the playoffs, the Lions, Jameson Williams, they ran a play like that, and it was like, dude, just pull it down. Like you're not like there's triple coverage there. Just because you have the opportunity to throw it doesn't mean you have to throw it.
Yeah.
So that's why like now I like him even more. Because the sack is better than interception. Because you are not a quarterback. Don't act like one.
Well, that's good news. Yeah, well, Cedric Wilson has 0 picks.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect quarterback rating. That's not true. Anyway.
What is the perfect QB rating?
Like 155.2 something.
Because he's got a career QB. He's got 158.3.
Oh, I think there's 2 different.
I got you.
Either way, that's it. Anything else you want to hit before we close out here?
No, just anxious for the combine to wrap up, and then we get closer to the official start of the league year.
Draft season, baby. We can start
getting cap compliant free agency. Yay! It never stops. So keep it tuned here on Inside Black and Gold.
Yeah, restructure season, baby. That's going to be the next few weeks. Is like all the restructures. Although I like I said, I think you're only going to see 4, maybe 5.
Heavy number crunching, though, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then we'll have to worry about next year. That's when we can start talking about next year. But all right. Who dat? Go Saints. Thanks, everyone, for listening. As always, hit me up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. Steve's going to be gone next week, so you have to deal with him. It's going to be Mardi Gras, so it'll probably be another later in the week pod as I recover from Tuesday. I've been to parades. This will be my 2nd night in a row. It's Muses tonight, and I got dragged out to the 2 last night, and I'm tired, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to suffer because I'm a team player.
One of these years, I am going to do one of the extravaganzas in the Superdome because I have not done that yet.
I haven't either. Endymion has one, I know. But I've never been to it because I'm always at my house.
Well, you got a prime spot for that, Fro. I don't blame you.
Yeah. Yes. But all right. Who dat? Go Saints. BZL.
Later, Saints fans. Thumbs down.
That's Alante. All right. Bye.